The winning blueprint presents.
In the lab room.
While you're here, go ahead and sub up. Welcome. You are in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. Today we will be talking about what's new in New York. This time, Jets. Jets. So this one is via YouTube subscriber, Double D. He's always posting up a team. He's got his team out of the way a long time ago. And so Double D, Devin Downing, posted up the New York Jets. And so here we are talking Jets football. And this is sort of a men's to Mexicano 51-50 because of that whole situation and it playing out a lot differently than we all anticipated. But nonetheless, here the Jets are. And we'll be talking about what's new in New York. And there are a plethora of changes in New York. And a lot of them happen out in the media. Not a lot of things happen under the radar in New York, especially with the Jets. They're like the stepbrother, and they're looking for attention. The Giants are the premier team in New York or New Jersey. Again, I'll never understand and figure that one out. But the Jets seem like the team always clamoring for attention. They want the spotlight, and they can't get out of the shadow of the big brother, the New York Giants, because they win. And winning trumps everything else, but there is never a shortage of drama with the Jets. That's for sure. And so there are a lot of changes in New York, and we'll get to them in a second. But first, let's go ahead and handle some house cleaning. If you want your team, or any team for that matter, to be first here in the What's New In segment, simply leave a comment at the bottom. And of course, you have to be first. That's the key. Be the first to leave a comment at the bottom of this video stating next. That's the second component. And the team that you want to see next here up on the What's New In segment. So with that being said and that taken care of, now let's talk about what's new in New York. And in order to talk about what's new, you got to get rid of the old. So we'll go out with the old in New York, Jet style. So anytime I go in with the new, out with the old, I always need the assistance of not only my big board behind me, but my handy dandy trusted pointer. Now, I've got both. We're going to talk New York Jets football, and I get a little passionate when I talk about the Jets because for some reason they seem to do a lot of dumb stuff. And anytime something happens that's egregious, I get very, very worked up. So if I get a little boisterous and I get a little animated, you got to bear with me. It's the Jets. They always do that to me. So you go out with the old and you start at the top. And there are a lot of changes with the Jets. And luckily enough, Rex Ryan was able to hold on to his job. I thought he was going to get canned, but everybody else did. He was the lone man standing when the dust settled and the smoke cleared. Rex Ryan remained standing. Everyone else was gone. And so we started at the top with GM Mike Tannenbaum. This man needed to be fired ASAP. ASAP. He needed to be finding the exit ASAP because Mike Tannenbaum absolutely dug a huge hole for the Jets and then just tossed them in. I mean, what he has done to this franchise in terms of the moves he's made and some of the acquisitions he's made and some of the bad contracts he's handed out has left this team strapped for cash, left them in a rut. I mean, this roster is horrendous. And it's a hodgepodge of who's who around the National Football League. I don't like the situation that the Jets are in right now, and it's going to be a huge uphill battle for the next GM. We'll talk about him in the next segment, but Mike Tannenbaum did this team an injustice. He needed to be fired, and he's no longer the GM of the New York Jets. And I think Mike Tannenbaum is actually a good GM. He just did a horrible, a wretched job in New York for the Jets. You look at offensive coordinator Tony Sparano. He was a guy, again, normally when an offensive coordinator just comes on board, he keeps his job until the coach is fired. But in this case, the Jets cleaned house. They told Rex Ryan, hey, This is it. You got one more shot. I think this is it. I think Rex has to win. And I don't think he's in a position to win. Maybe he's got that dreaded vote of confidence and he feels like, hey, I've got at least 2 years to try to get this thing turned around. But whatever the case may be, Tony Sperano came in last year and I was disappointed because I thought that he was going to come in and give us a little bit of that Dolphins 2008, 2009 flavor when they won the division with Chad Pennington and they busted out the Wildcat. And he really squeezed that rag that was that Dolphins roster and got the most out of it. I mean, he filled up a bucket with talent and squeezed that rag. That talent rag was dry a long time ago. That Dolphins team was not that talented. Yet he found a way to squeeze out enough talent to fill a bucket and win a division. That one baffled me. And so I thought I was going to get that Tony Sperano, the guy that was innovative, the guy that was going to use this Jets roster to the best of his ability. What I got was a train wreck in 2012. And I thought that at times Tony Sperano was lost. Was he handcuffed? I don't know. Maybe he wanted to do more with Tebow. Maybe he didn't. I don't know what the situation was, but what I saw offensively from this team was anemic. It was horrendous. It was the type of stuff that gets guys like Tony Sperano fired. He's no longer your offensive coordinator in New York. You look at defensive coordinator Mike Patton. Here's a guy that was given the opportunity to sign an extension in New York. They offered him an extension to stay on as defensive coordinator, and he said, nah, I think I'll head out of here. He saw the writing on the wall. This thing in New York isn't going in the right direction. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. And Mike Patton realized that, hey, I'm going to go crashing and burning with this thing. If I stick around, I'll get out while I still can. He went to Buffalo, same title there. He's the defensive coordinator in Buffalo, but there's a lot more hope in Buffalo right now, I feel, than there is in New York with the Jets. A lot more talent there as well. And so Mike Patton isn't a dumb guy. If I want to ever be a head coach in this league, I got to get out of here while I still can and continue to build up my reputation around this league so that when those openings come, my name will start running in circles around this league. And so Mike Patton got out just in time, just in the nick of time. And so he's no longer your defensive coordinator. You look at quarterback Tim Tebow. Oh, as the guys on NFL Network love to say. And I was so disappointed with this situation. I had so many rants on the Tim Tebow situation during the season last year. It's not even funny. I said that I was going to stop. I was going to leave that topic alone because it used to get my blood curdling. I mean, how they did Tim Tebow in New York, travesty. Because their quarterback position was so bad last year that it was unbelievable that they couldn't get Tim Tebow on the field. It just didn't make 1 ounce of sense to me. And so, yeah, Tim Tebow has his deficiencies. They didn't give the man a chance, though. Okay? And so he needed to leave. It was a media frenzy. It was a spectacle. It was more harm than good having Tim Tebow on that roster, especially when your quarterback is Mark Sanchez and he isn't getting the job done. And so you're always looking to the guy behind him. In the case of Tim Tebow, he was the guy behind him, but yet they didn't want to put him in the game. Magically, Greg McElroy finds his way into the game before Tim Tebow does. I'll never understand it. I'm not going to go into that again. I'm not going to do a whole rant on this. I've done too many. I said I wasn't going to do it again. Tim Tebow is no longer on this roster, and I feel like it's good for both parties involved, the Jets and for Tim Tebow. You look at Sean Green. This is a running back that was your bell cow, a guy that when you were going to the AFC Championship, it seemed like every single year, he was the guy running the rock for you. And he's a solid back. He's one of those 3 yards in a cloud of dust backs. If you block for 7, Sean will get you 7. If you block for 9, Sean will get you 9. Sean isn't going to outrun anyone. Sean isn't going to make a lot of guys miss. He's a tough ball carrier. He will bounce off of some arm tackles, but in terms of wiggle, doesn't exist with Sean Green's game. And so I just thought that if the Jets wanted to take that next step as an offense and be more explosive, you weren't going to do it with Sean Green being your primary ball carrier. It just wasn't going to happen. He signs a deal with Tennessee where I think he'll be better used there because Chris Johnson is definitely lightning, and he can strike at any time. Sean Green will be the hammer. He'll be the thunder in Tennessee, and I think it's a good fit there for him. You look at wide receiver Braylon Edwards. Here's a guy that leaves, comes back, leaves, comes back. I can't keep track of Braylon Edwards and where he shows up and where he isn't and where he is. He ended up in New York after a cup of tea with Seattle. It just seems like Braylon Edwards is everywhere. It's like Waldo with Braylon Edwards. Where is Braylon Edwards? And you got to look around the league and see if he's on someone else's roster. Oh, look, there he is. He's on San Francisco's roster. Oh, look, there he is. He's with the Seattle Seahawks. Oh, look, there he is. He's with the New York Jets. You don't know where Braylon Edwards is, and it's a shame because the guy is ultra talented. But off the field issues, and sometimes I question the work ethic with him. He gets injured sometimes, and he should have been better than what he has been in this league. We saw the year he had in Cleveland, and I want to say his sophomore season when Derek Anderson lit it up. So did he. Kellen Winslow had a big year, and you just thought, man, this Cleveland Browns offense could be really dangerous for years to come. And then the bottom just fell out of that thing. Braylon Edwards got hurt. He got in trouble off the field. They ran him out of Cleveland. And then he came to New York and helped you get to the postseason, helped you get to the AFC Championship game. I said, man, this guy's career has been revitalized. I love his role in New York. This is great. This is perfect for Braylon Edwards. And then I just don't know what happened. Doesn't matter. Braylon Edwards and his career is definitely past its prime now. If he gets another job in the league, he'll be lucky, but he's no longer in New York. Maybe if you guys have 2 injuries to the wide receiver position, you'll pick up the phone and call him like you always do. But as of right now, no more Braylon Edwards. Look at wide receiver Chaz Schillings. He's a guy that you got from the Raiders, and you listen to any Raiders fan, and they'll tell you that Chaz Schillings is a very talented guy. All he has to do is stay healthy, and we got to beast that receiver. Never pans out in Oakland. He goes over to New York, and you're thinking, this is the fresh start he needs. He gets to New York, and you get the same Chaz Schillings. Injured, unproductive. The Jets kind of figured it out faster than the Raiders did. Raiders hung around for about 2 or 3 seasons of unproductive Chaz Schillings before they moved on. Jets said, hey, we just need one, and then we'll move on as well. They did that. No more Chaz Schillings in New York. You look at tight end Dustin Keller. Really big target for you over the years. He's turned out to be one heck of a receiving tight end. Last season, off the field things, couple of injuries, it wasn't the same Dustin Keller. And you could have used some really good Dustin Keller last year because your options to throw the football to were absolutely terrible. Terrible in New York. And you could have used some Dustin Keller last season. But he really wasn't there. He's now sleeping with the enemy, as I always like to say, within the division, now a Dolphin. So you're going to still see Dustin twice a season, just not the way that you're normally used to seeing him. And so we'll see if Dustin Keller can help out the passing game in Miami because he won't be helping the New York Jets passing game any longer. Look at kicker Nick Folk. Nick has always been a marginal kicker at best. And it just caught up with him in New York. Simply put, you can't continue to have a percentage in the 70s every single year and think you're going to keep a job as a kicker in this league. You got to be in the 80s consistently and get up there in the 90s every once in a while. This guy lives in the 70s and 60s, and you can't do that as a kicker in this league. He misses too many kicks, and he's not a guy you can trust with the game on the line that he's going to pound it through. And so the Jets are looking for a new kicker. Nick Folk is no longer your field goal kicker. You look at offensive tackle Jason Smith. You did a swap-a-roo with the St. Louis Rams to acquire Jason Smith. You gave away your headache. They gave you theirs. And it just didn't work out. You realized that their headache was just as bad as your headache. And so Jason Smith is no longer on your roster. And this guy is turning into a humongous bust. I'm just waiting for him to fizzle out of the league so it can be confirmed that this guy is a monumental bust because he was drafted 2nd overall out of Baylor by the St. Louis Rams. And he's just been a horrid tackle in this league. And so Jason Smith no longer on your roster. You were hoping that a fresh start in a new environment would be what Jason Smith needed to kick it into high gear, but he's just not good. And that's the bottom line. Offensive guard Matt Slauson moves on to Chicago. He's a solid guard, not a guy that will change the game in the interior of your offensive line, but he was your offensive guard, and you're going to miss Matt Slauson because your offensive line was okay. It wasn't the best, wasn't the worst, and Matt Slauson wasn't the best, wasn't the worst. He was just solid. And I think that you can do better than Matt Slauson at the guard position, but again, the Jets aren't a team that have a lot of talented guys just waiting in the wings to take over. And players aren't starving to come to New York to play for the Jets. And they don't have any money anyway. So it's going to be hard to replace a guy that's marginal like Matt Slauson. It just really is. You're just going to have to hope that someone on the roster can come in and fill in for this guy. You look at offensive guard Brandon Moore. Here's another guy that's extremely solid, more so than Matt Slauson. We all remember the butt fumble in that Thanksgiving Day, or as I like to call it, the Turkey Day dismemberment of the New York Jets by the New England Patriots. And so Brandon Moore is a really good guard, has been really good for a long time in this league. I felt like the Jets needed to re-sign this guy because you don't have anything else, but they decided to go in a different direction. I don't blame them, but at the same time, when you don't have a lot, sometimes it's just better to just hold on to what you have. When you don't have a lot and you don't have a lot to spend, hard to get rid of the stuff you already have. Sometimes it just doesn't make sense to me, but no more Brandon Moore in New York. So you look at safety, Jeremiah Bell. Veteran safety, you're looking to upgrade the position. He's the guy that's getting long in the tooth. Okay, he's not getting long in the tooth. He is long in the tooth. He's limited in what he can bring to the table anymore as a safety. He's more of a in-the-box guy. When Jeremiah Bell was at his best, he was versatile, could play in pass coverage as well as come down and drop the hammer in the box. I think he's just relegated now to dropping the hammer in the box and being a solid tackler. Don't think he's a guy that's going to make plays on the football per se anymore. And so Jeremiah Bell has been pushed out of the door in New York. And if you are the Jets, you got to find some safeties here because, as you will see, I'm going to run down a list of safeties that are no longer in New York, and I don't know who's going to replace these guys. So you look at cornerback Darrelle Revis. Ouch. Ouch. This one hurts. This one hurts because he was the best thing smoking in New York. He was the only reason that the Jets were relevant in terms of actually being good. You take Darrelle Revis off the team and the Jets are a joke. The only pub that they would get would be that of having Mark Sanchez throw up all over himself, Tim Tebow not getting in the game, or something of that nature. Some kind of sideshow act would be the attention, and not because of good football players like Darrelle Revis. But he wanted out. He knew that the Jets weren't going anywhere. He also knew that the Jets, and look, I don't blame the Jets for this. I don't. Because Darrelle Revis is one of those guys that's just extremely greedy. And I get it. Look, you're in the National Football League. Dog eat dog. You got to get yours when you can get it. And so I'm not mad at any player that decides that they want more money, except when you're being irrational. But even then, a lot of times I'll still take the player's side because these organizations will do players dirty a lot of times. And so when Darrelle Revis came back and he wanted more money, the Jets said, okay. And they gave him a better deal. But the deal wasn't up yet, and Darrelle Revis decided, hey, I want more money now. And you're like, hey, dude, how many times are you going to come up here for seconds? It's like having a lunch line that's a buffet-style line, and there's limited quantities of food. There's a limited amount. And you want to make sure that everyone eats first before people come up for seconds. And Darrelle Revis gets his food, he goes and he scarfs it down, and he comes back up with his tray, and he wants more food. He cuts the line. There are other people who haven't eaten yet, and he's got his tray out like, here, slap some more up here. I want more. And you're like, hey, didn't we already give you some already? And he's like, yeah, but I want more. And you slap some more on his tray, and you say, hey, don't come back. And he goes, okay. And then you start feeding the rest of the people. And before everyone else gets the rest of their food, look who's back in the line again with their tray. Hey, I want more. No, we just gave you some more food already. You can't have any more. And that's Darrelle Revis. In a nutshell, he keeps coming back to the table wanting more money. How many times can you give this guy a new deal for more money? There are other guys on his roster that need to be paid. There are other free agents that you're targeting that you want to pay. And Darrelle Revis wants all of the money for himself. I'm not mad at Darrelle Revis, but if I'm the Jets, I understand the situation here. And you got to get something for him. You can't allow this guy to just walk away. You got to get something for him, and that's what they did. They traded him to the Bucs, picked up some picks. Good for the Jets. No more Darrelle Revis on your roster. Ouch! That hurts, though. Safety LaRon Landry, probably the best defensive player on your team a season ago. And sometimes this guy can be a head case, but he's a really good football player. When healthy, this guy makes a difference. And he played really well for you last year. You wanted him back, but as we all know with LaRon Landry, it's all about the green, man. All about the dirty cream green. And he wanted a lot of it, and there was no discount for the Jets, and he made that known. Hey, I'm not giving anybody a discount on anything. I want to get paid, and I want to be paid by the highest bidder. That was the Indianapolis Colts. So that's where LaRon Landry now resides in the National Football League. That's the Jets' loss. But if you ask LaRon Landry, that's his game. Dollar bill, y'all. So you look at safety, Eric Smith. Veteran backup safety is a guy that Rex Ryan trusted for a long time. But again, he's a safety that's limited and was always limited. And now that he's getting up there in age, he's even more limited in what he can bring to you on the football field. And so I think Eric Smith, his time just simply ran out in New York. He's no longer a Jet. You look at linebacker Brian Thomas, lifer, a long-time lifer as a Jet. This guy has been with this organization for about 10 or 11 years, it seems like. It seems like an eternity since Brian Thomas first entered the field as a Jet. And he's been there for a long time, and he's finally been shown the door in New York. Very productive safety. One of the quietest guys you'll hear about with the Jets. He was productive, yet you never really heard about Brian Thomas. Yet he was one of the better linebackers on his team for a long time, but he's no longer in New York. Brian Thomas out as Jets linebacker. You look at linebacker Bart Scott. Here's a guy that I love using his quote all the time. If nothing else, if Bart Scott never plays another down in the league, he'll always be around because of guys like me. Because I can't wait for the football season. So guess what? Bart Scott can't wait. But Bart Scott's tenure in New York was over a while ago, it seemed like. He had lost a step about 2 seasons ago. Still a hard-nosed, tough linebacker that will fill the gap in the run game. But as far as a guy that was extremely athletic in the passing game when he first got to New York, those days are gone. He can't run around and chase guys like he used to. He can't make plays on the football like he used to. He's strictly an run-stopping linebacker now. And he's no longer on the Jets roster. He hasn't found work yet. We'll see if someone picks Bart Scott up during training camp. But he was a solid linebacker for the Jets, helped them get to the postseason several times in New York. But his athleticism has definitely waned, and I think it took a toll on him. And that's why he's no longer in New York. You look at defensive end Mike DeVito, one of Rex Ryan's favorite players, no longer in New York. Solid in the run game, as solid as it gets in the National Football League at the defensive end in a 3-4 defense, playing the 5 technique against the run is Mike DeVito. I mean, you don't get much better than this guy in the run game. He's in Kansas City, and he's really going to help the Kansas City Chiefs defense a lot. That's going to be a guy you definitely miss along your defensive line in New York. Look at defensive tackle Sion Pua, and you released him, no longer in New York. You get a guy like Muhammad Wilkerson. You draft another defensive tackle in this year's draft, and we'll talk about him a little bit later. And all of a sudden, a guy like Sion Pua is just not needed. He's just not necessary. And so he's no longer on the roster. That rounds out with the old with New York, and that's a lot. And a lot of these guys were key contributors. But guess what? They were key contributors on a bad football team. And a lot of these guys, believe it or not, are older. There are a couple of guys up here that are relatively young, but for the most part, you see a lot of veterans just being pushed out of the door. And the Jets should have done this 2 seasons ago instead of waiting until this thing eroded the way that it has to do this. But nonetheless, that's out with the old with the Jets. Now let's go in with the new with the New York Jets. So you go in with the new with the Jets, and you start with GM John Idzik. And he came in, and the first thing he said, and the word that he keeps repeating over and over, is competition. Competition. And when you're a bad football team, yes, you need competition. You need guys to push each other. But This is a bad football team, I think. And we'll see. We'll see. Everyone has hope this time of year. I don't like to be a dream crusher. I don't like crushing dreams. So I'll stay away from that, but I'll say that John Idzik has come in. He's got a good message. He understood what he needed to do with Darrelle Revis. I thought he did the right thing there. And so he's off to a good start in New York. He's got a lot of messes to clean up. I think Mike Tannenbaum spilled a lot of messes and didn't clean them up. John Idzik, he's got a mop. He's got a broom. He's got a couple of paper towels in his back pocket. He's got a lot of cleaning up to do. So he started, and I think he's done well to this point. We'll see how it all shakes out for him in New York. Offensive coordinator Marty Mornhinweg, first year in New York as the Jets coordinator, and he's a solid guy. He's been in the league a long time. You can trust Marty Mornhinweg to call the plays in New York, and so expect Marty Mornhinweg to do a better job than Tony Sparano did a season ago, and hopefully he'll be able to highlight Mark Sanchez's strengths in this offense and get Mark Sanchez on track, because I've been ripping Mark Sanchez a new one for a long time. And he needs some help. And maybe Marty Mornhinweg can inject some life into this New York Jets offense. Look at defensive coordinator Dennis Thurman. This is one of those promotions from within type of deals. Here's your defensive backs coach, who was elevated to defensive coordinator once Mike Patton left for Buffalo. So you're looking for Dennis Thurman to bring some of that energy that he has with his D-backs to the defensive coordinator position. You look at running back Mike Goodson. I don't like Mike Goodson. I didn't like Mike Goodson in Carolina. I didn't like Mike Goodson in Oakland. I don't like Mike Goodson in New York, and he hasn't even taken a snap for the Jets yet. He's already in trouble. He's not a guy that you want on your roster as a difference maker, and he's getting in trouble to boot. And so I don't know how this thing is going to end in New York for Mike Goodson, but it hasn't started out well, that's for sure. Running back Chris Ivory. This is a guy that I do like, and I think he's a difference maker at the running back position. I think the Saints, they just had too many backs in their backfield, and this guy didn't get the opportunity that he deserved. He's a guy that averages over 5 yards a carry annually, can make some big plays happen, doesn't have huge top-end speed, but if he gets behind the defense, he can go, and he can accelerate. And so he's deceptively fast. I like Chris Ivory. I like his running style. I like his ability to break tackles and make guys miss. I think he's going to be an asset for this Jets team, and something that they haven't had in the running back position in a while, and that's a guy that's explosive. And they had to trade for him with the New Orleans Saints to get him, but you got to do what you got to do. You got yourself a really good running back in Chris Ivory, I think. Wide receiver Ben Abumanu. I don't like Ben Abumanu. He's a solid receiver. Okay, I'm being nice. He's not a solid receiver. He's one of those standard run-of-the-mill dime a dozen receivers in this league. And you can find someone younger to do that. You can find an undrafted free agent to do what Ben Abumanu is going to do for you. He's going to play special teams. He's going to catch 7 to 15 passes, do nothing for you offensively, and that'll be that. And you can do better than Ben Abumanu, but he's on your roster. Let's see what he brings to the table for the New York Jets. Guard Steven Peterman. Got him from the Detroit Lions. I like Steven Peterman. He's solid. You lose a couple of guards, you replace him with a guy like Steven Peterman. Solid move by the Jets. I think he can be an upgrade over a guy like Matt Slauson on your offensive line. I like Steven Peterman, like the move. He's going to fit in well with the Jets. You look at guard Willie Colon. You lost Brandon Moore. You're going to have to replace him. Willie Colon is the guy that you seek to do that. If Willie Colon can stay healthy, I think Willie Colon will be okay. Is he the best guard? Absolutely not. But is he a guy that can come in and be solid for you on the interior of the line? Sure. He's not going to be a world beater. He'll be solid. And the Jets right now, they're just a solid football team. And so, at best, and I'm being generous there too. Look, I'm not getting into that. We're not going to do that today. Willie Colon is going to be your starting guard, either left or right. We'll see where he is, probably left guard, but solid acquisition to your football team. You look at tight end Kellen Winslow. Talented guy. When healthy, very productive. You look at his numbers throughout his career and you say, hey, why didn't this guy play in 2012? He played sparingly with the New England Patriots and essentially had to beg for that tryout. Got onto the roster early on and was let go. He talks too much. Simply put, Kellen Winslow doesn't know when to shut up, and sometimes his mouth overshadows his play. If he just play, stay relatively healthy, and shut up, he'd be fine. But it's when he opens his mouth when he gets in trouble, and for what he brings to the table, it's not worth it. It's not like this guy is posting 97 catch, 1,150 yard seasons with 12 touchdowns. It's not like he's going out and being a handful for defenses to control. He's just a guy that's a check down monster. He'll catch 74 balls and 40 of them will be within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. And so he just needs to be quiet. He's already come into New York and said, hey, I want to catch 100 balls. Shut up. Who's talking to you? Why are you talking? Just play. Just play, man. Just play. He's a solid acquisition, and especially after losing Dustin Keller, you could use a guy like Kellen Winslow on your roster. Safety, DeJuan Landry. You lose LaRon Landry, so you go and get his brother, DeJuan Landry. He's not as good as his brother, but he's extremely solid. I thought he played really well for Jacksonville. I thought he was extremely durable for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So you could use a guy to come in, play the safety position because you just let go of 3 safeties, 2 of them who were starters. And so you need someone to come in and play safety. DeJuan Landry will definitely handle that for you. You look at linebacker Antoine Barnes. Ever since Rex Ryan got in control in New York, he's been looking for a guy to get after the quarterback at the linebacker position. He struck out every single time. He was hoping Quentin Coples would just come in and erupt. Hasn't happened yet, but I see flashes. But Antoine Barnes is a guy that has gotten pressure in Baltimore. He got a little bit of pressure with San Diego. You're hoping he can turn it back up in New York with the Jets. We'll see. He's a guy that is better than anything you had on this roster from a pass rushing standpoint last year, so you'll take it. You look at defensive end, Antonio Garay comes over from the San Diego Chargers as well. He's a guy that's a lot of flash, not a lot of substance sometimes. If he could just play football and stop cutting designs into his hair and trying to stand out from the rest of the team, if he could just play football, Antonio Garay is a solid football player. And I think he'll help you as a rotational depth guy. Not a guy necessarily you want to start, but in limited quantities, in limited snaps, he's a guy that can help you on the defensive line. So that's in with the new in terms of free agent acquisitions, new guys in the front office, as well as trades. Now let's get to the draft picks. And if you're looking for an extensive breakdown of the 2013 NFL draft, then I will send you to the 2013 draft wrap-up series that I've done on every team in the league, including the New York Jets. So if you're looking for an extensive, thorough breakdown of these players, go there, 2013 NFL draft wrap-up. Cornerback D. Milner, first-round selection. Look at him as a guy that comes in, and you don't want to say replaces Darrelle Revis. You can't replace Revis, but someone that will come in and soften the impact of losing Darrelle Revis. Defensive tackle Sheldon Richardson. Love this guy. Think you will too. That's also a first-round pick. Got that one from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Quarterback Geno Smith. He's been a lot of the hoopla in New York this offseason. There's always something going on in New York. You look at guard Brian Winters in the 3rd round. You look at tackle Oday Abouche in the 5th round. Guard William Campbell in the 6th round. And rounding out your draft, fullback Tommy Bohannon. And so those are guys that have a legitimate shot, if not locks, to make this roster. We go from there to undrafted free agent rookies. These are the guys fighting, scratching, clawing, trying to get onto an NFL roster. Let's run down this list. Defensive end Jake McDonough out of Iowa State. Defensive back Rontez Miller out of Cal by way of Pennsylvania. Tight end Chris Pantow out of Boston College. Offensive tackle Mark Popick out of South Florida. Linebacker Sean Proger out of Northern Illinois. Wide receiver Zach Rogers out of Tennessee. Wide receiver Marcus Davis out of Virginia Tech. Linebacker Troy Davis out of Central Florida. Tight end Mike Shanahan out of Pittsburgh. Quarterback Matt Sims out of Tennessee. Defensive back Mike Edwards out of Hawaii. Wide receiver Ryan Spadola out of Lehigh. Center Dalton Freeman out of Clemson. Wide receiver KJ Stroud out of Bethune-Cookman. Offensive tackle Trey Gilio out of Northern Arizona. And rounding out the group, kicker Brett Mayer out of Nebraska. These are guys that are looking to crack this roster. They'll have a legitimate shot because the Jets just don't have a lot. The cupboard is a little empty, a little bare in New York. And so these guys have legitimate shots of making this roster. They got to come in, impress the coaching staff, work extremely hard, and beat out some of these veterans that the Jets have on this roster. So we go from in with the new, switching gears to any philosophical changes in New York. So you look at philosophical changes for the New York Jets, and it starts at the top. Offensively, out with Tony Sparano as your coordinator, in with Marty Mornhinweg. Here's a guy that's an established offensive coordinator in this league, in Marty Mornhinweg. There won't be a lot of gadgets. I thought the Jets had too much gadgetry last year, and they just needed to get back to the basics. They weren't even good at the simple things. And If you're not good at the simple things, how can you try to be gadgety? I don't understand that. Be good at the basics first. Get your base offense correct before you start trying other things. And they weren't good at the simplest of simple things last year. And so get that right first. And I think Marty Morningwig will get back to the basics. They will run the football to protect this quarterback position that isn't all that. I think he'll get the football out of Mark Sanchez's hands a lot quicker this year. And hopefully guys just stay healthy. You lost Santonio Holmes. You lost Stephen Hill last year. You had a lot of injuries. You were basically relegated to throwing the football to Jeremy Curley and a whole bunch of no-name tight ends, Cumberland, and a whole bunch of guys that you can't win in this league throwing the football to. And so Jeremy Curley is fine as a third option, just not as a first. And so hopefully guys are able to stay healthy and they can get the football out of Mark Sanchez's hands quickly. You don't want this guy taking 7-step drops and 5-step drops a lot. That's when trouble starts. That's when he starts overanalyzing things. He starts panicking. He makes bad decisions. He turns the football over. If you get the ball out of his hands, 3-step drops, back foot hits the ground, ball comes out. He can't think as much. He can't make as many mistakes. I expect Marty Morningwig to make that kind of adjustment in New York this year to get the football out of Mark Sanchez's hands quicker so that the mistakes are eliminated. I expect Chris Ivory to get the football a heck of a lot in New York this year. And so I expect for the Jets offense to be a little bit quicker tempo. Sanchez getting the football out of his hands a lot quicker, and this offense having more of a tempo to it than a season ago. You look at the defensive side of the football, and you got Thurman coming up as your defensive coordinator, taking over from Mike Pettin, and Pettin was an outstanding defensive coordinator. A lot of guys that were on this roster were blushing about Mike Pettin and his ability to make adjustments at halftime and how astute he was as a defensive coordinator, and they think it's only a matter of time before this guy lands a head coaching gig. And so Thurman has some big shoes to fill. You look at this defense, and you got a lot of young guys that I think can be really talented in this league. I think that you look at Wilkerson, he's starting to develop. I think Quentin Coples is starting to get it. You add in a couple of guys like Sheldon Richardson, D. Milliner. You already have Antonio Cromartie. You get DeJuan Landry in free agency, and all of a sudden you got some pieces to work with. And so you got to get this defense to gel. You got to get pressure on the quarterback. The Jets simply don't get enough pressure on the quarterback. And I don't know if it has to be manufactured with blitzes or guys will actually step up and win one-on-one matchups. Whatever the case may be, the Jets have to get to the quarterback. They don't get to the quarterback nearly enough. And if you don't get to the quarterback in this league, and we have some really good ones, they will pick your defense apart. I don't care who your cornerback is. I don't care that Darrelle Revis is your cornerback. If the quarterback has 7 seconds to throw, Darrelle Revis is going to get beat. That receiver is going to get open because it turns into backyard football after a long enough time back there to throw the football. So the Jets have to get pressure on the quarterback. You get pressure on the quarterback, you force them into mistakes. You force them into errant throws. Stop the run, get pressure on the quarterback, force some turnovers. The Jets have to be more aggressive on defense. I thought last year they just weren't good enough to just sit back and play coverage. You can't play coverage when you don't get pressure on the quarterback. You got guys up front that can get pressure. You can drop back and play zone. But when the quarterback has all day to throw the football because you're dropping in the zone coverage and no one's getting pressure on the quarterback, those holes in those zones will be exposed. I expect Rex Ryan and Dennis Thurman to amp up the defense, be more aggressive with some of the pieces that they have now. They've got some hybrid guys like Sheldon Richardson that you can move around and do some things with. I expect them to get creative and generate pass rush on this football team. They have to do something because they can't sit back and allow teams to just throw the football on them like they did a season ago. And that's going to do it for the Jets. That's what's new in New York with the Jets. Jets, Jets, Jets.
Like the content? Want more? Sub up.